Hello.
Hi, how are you guys doing today? How are you doing, Stephen?
I'm doing well, Robyn. I thanks everyone for joining. I actually wanted, before we get too far, start to discuss something pretty serious and heavy, which is the reviews for the Funny Girl musical, uh, revival. Robyn and I have been talking about this throughout the week. That what's amusing is that the reviews have seemed to me to be overwhelmingly indulgent of how almost apologetic of how miscast the lead is.
Yeah, like, well, they're just like really trying to be like, she seems like a nice gal.
It seems as if like someone like troopers came into her home in the middle of the night, her and put her on stage and made her do this despite her best
Or
protestation.
someone's rich parents.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
just saying.
So,
Yeah, so
but what's your take on what you've been reading about how because she's not good. She's not good at it.
I
That's my
mean, this is the thing. She was never like a singer, and I feel like people, I think what sort of bothers me personally is that, like, yes, part of the reason why she got the part is because certain people's parents invested in the show.
Mhm.
And that, or at least that's the word around town. And so that's sort of like, personally disappointing. And, all of the reviews are like, she does good comedic timing. And I don't dislike her. I just don't think that she can sing that well. She has a weak voice. And, I'm not the world's greatest singer either. So I'm not like, oh, it should have been me, although it should have been me. Um,
uh,
but like, it's just, I feel like a lot of them were like, well, they should have like, lowered the register for her, but her voice is higher than Barbara Streisand's. Like, I know I can sing the entire Funny Girl score, and there's like one note that I can't hit, and I have a very deep voice, um,
well,
which people have commented on. Um,
but why? I mean, it's a show. In my opinion, and I think some others have shared this. It is not necessarily a show for the ages. It's not necessarily a great show. We remember
yeah,
it only because of Barbara Streisand, and specifically some of the songs that people don't even they associate more with
yeah,
Barbara than with Funny Girl. So like, don't rain
for
on my
sure. And I
parade.
heard that Jane Lynch is fabulous, and the guy who plays Eddie is fabulous. Um, and has an amazing tap dance number, which I would watch the show just to see because you know how I feel about tap dancing. It is the handsomest of all talents to have.
Yeah.
Everyone looks everyone looks really dapper while tap dancing. It's just the law. Like Fred
I
Astaire, Fred Astaire looks like I don't even know what he looks like. He is not an attractive man. Like, but he's tap dancing and like all the ladies are like, yes, this is what I want. I,
well,
Ginger Rogers, am really into this. And Audrey
apparently
Hepburn, and,
it's sort of a sexual thing that he, his tap dancing and all that.
yeah,
And even though I mostly refer to tap dancing in a pejorative sense
yes,
regarding, and I think it's become that, like, you're kind of tap dancing out of something. But
yeah,
the art form itself, I enjoy. But yes, this Funny Girl just seems like trying to do let's redo Purple Rain, but we don't have Prince. And then it's kind of like, well, I don't. Maybe you want to think of another project because I
yeah,
think he might have been the main appeal of that. I mean, Morris Day was good, but I think
yeah,
this is sort of you don't have your lead. Um, that had come up actually because a friend, I was at a show, a play last night, and a friend asked me, she's going to be in New York. She's like, what should I see? And knowing my own fondness for Barbara Streisand, she was like, should I go see Funny Girl? And it's like, well, I don't think so. I think maybe also I can't guarantee it'll still be playing, but when you do
yeah.
go, try to that actually
I
leads
mean,
to
I think I'd like to see Broadway move. Oh, I get why they put like, do things like with celebrities, like Pam Anderson is in Chicago now. Um, like several Real Housewives have been in Chicago by now. Um, and I get why they do that to get people in from tourists and everything, and people want to see these celebrities rather than you know Broadway people that they've never heard of. But at the same time, the Broadway people they've never heard of are like usually are often better than the, oh, here's the random celebrity, you know them from Real Housewives. Or, it's like, this person, it's someone it's not scary. And I get that that's like,
and I think the celebrity had gone on for a while. I don't know if you knew the story that BB Newirth was nervous about accepting even just a recurring role on Cheers, and she went to what she adorably refers to as mom and dad, Bob Fosse and Gwen Verdon, and it's like, well, should I do this? Should I leave? And they were sort of, no, go for it and get some money. And I think she was even realizing that to do the stuff she would later want to do, it would benefit her to be known, to have beyond theater. I mean, she was a tremendous director before she started doing Cheers, but I mean, when I was working in Chicago, people would come in, oh, the lady from Cheers is in this, and then would be blown away because she's not the lady from Cheers when she's on stage. But talking about this, trust us, won't be all musical theater. But another friend I talked about, an actor friend of mine who was moving to New York, is going to be in a play. I won't name the play so I don't embarrass this person. But she had sent me, oh, Stephen, you lived in New York. Here's my list of things I would like. She's someone who's never lived in the city. And it's like a list of things that it's like, well, you are never going to have any of these things in a New York apartment with the budget you've given. Like, and I don't know. What I did was I sort of maybe passively sent, there's this guy, Cash Jordan. He's a YouTuber, and like he will go to like these apartments, ridiculously apart, like where you open a refrigerator door and it barely clears the countertop or something. That's and it's like $6,000, and to sort of give an idea of what's out there. But our housing is insane, right? Like, just how do we have any? It seems like we have no solution for, as these cities get more and more expensive, what to do with these people. And from what I'm seeing, it's being further, like, poverty is being further criminalized. I think there was something about camping in public parks or whatever being a crime. And look, I get it, right? There's certain things you don't want to see, and not in a snottish way, but like it is not healthy for the public or for the people involved in this. But it just sort of like trying to criminalize poverty to the fact of, oh, so now we can take someone whose crime is being poor and put them in prison forever because they will mount up all these fines or fees. And then, as you would say, why can't we just house people? Like, why do we?
Well, I mean, it's the least expensive solution, but it's not satisfying to Americans. It's not the story that they want to hear. And, honestly, everything in the entire world is fucked up because Americans want everything to be satisfying and, and feel good about stuff. That's really about it.
Punitive aspect was going to the San Francisco DA, who's being blamed for a lot of either potentially rising crime and whatever, he's being potentially recalled. And I think someone had commented on, it's a very selective account of it. So this narrative of quote unquote Democratic, blue state DAs, former DAs, being soft on crime and so forth, and leading to all this. Yet Jacksonville, Florida, Republican mayor, Republican governor, it has about the same density as San Francisco, but like has far more crime, but gets nowhere near the coverage of this concern. And it's frustrating because
people like that narrative. They're like, Democrats are soft on crime and then therefore there is more crime. Republicans are hard on crime and therefore there is less crime. It's the same thing where like a Republican could not lower any taxes and people would be like, oh, my taxes were low then. And a Democrat could lower their taxes and they'd be like, oh my God, my taxes are sky high. It's just, that is the narrative that people are used to, and like the actual facts do not matter.
And it's been someone had traced it. It's a very clear process that happened in 2020. Both obviously there was stuff occurring with the pandemic and people being, housed or whatever, but specifically the police is like at the first sign, both police and Republicans, the first sign of any sort of idea of holding police accountable for their violence or so forth. It was just spin the reformers to go after those specific
Yeah.
reformers who weren't going to, like, say, unleash. And look, it's not like I'm anti-cop, but when I feel like people are just like, oh
I
wow.
mean,
But when people seem like, I really hate the DA who doesn't let me beat up, you know, poor people enough. Like, that's the part of my job I really like. Even when people come to the cops and say, we're going to try to find different solutions. So we're not criminalizing the poor, this whole Silicon Valley thing that's happening. So we're not criminalizing this. It's just, no, we really want to just spend our mornings bludgeoning poor, because that's what happens. You bludgeon poor people, shift them away, throw them in something. And you do that early in the morning. And this happens in a lot of states in Portland as well. And that was the thing. You did it early in the morning so that when you and I would get up and go walking down the street, we didn't see it. And
yeah,
that to me was like, would be the worst job in the world. I would feel like
yeah.
a part of my soul
You
was
would
dying.
feel like a terrible person.
But apparently that's not the case. The people who do that feel like, this is great. I am making the world, I'm making the streets aesthetic, I'm not having to say safer, but really aesthetically more pleasant for rich people, slightly higher on the economic ladder
Yeah.
than I am. I am happy to serve that role, which is a very strange thing of our capitalist society, right? So, but
It's just, I don't even necessarily know that it's capitalist. Like, I mean, it is, but it's also like, and I'm hardly a great defender of capitalism, but it's also just this general like level of bloodthirstiness. Like
mhm.
people want to see, like, it's just, there's always this desire to see like things be solved by being horrible to people. Like that is the answer. And the worse you are to them, the more they will, change, and the less likely people will be to be like that. And it's like, it's literally not true. It's in fact the opposite of true. But people care less about, the end result a lot of the time than they do about the process. Like,
And that reminds me of what Bill Maher said, and I dread seeing him trending on Saturday mornings.
oh God, it's always something terrible. It's never anything good. Like, I mean, not that it would be, but
But his latest, for those who might be unaware, was he had commented on how, again, very anti-trans statements and so forth. But again, the idea that these trans kids are just trying to be trendy and hip, and
yeah.
they're just following trends. And his logic is that in California there are more trans people kids coming out. In Ohio there are fewer. So California, it has to be one or the other. Ohio can be destroying trans people, so maybe California is creating them, which is just, well, if it's
In the
where,
transgender factory in downtown LA. I mean, the thing with that is that I think a lot of people have a hard time grasping, oh, we made things so horrible for people and for, young people, especially, to feel like they could come out and they could, say who they are, and they could explore their own gender identity in whatever way they want. We made it difficult for them. We did not create, like, our environment was bad. And so therefore, yes, a lot of people did not come out. It's, they always say the same thing with like left-handedness. They tried to beat left-handedness out of people. And, there were very low numbers of left-handed people. And then they stopped doing that because they were like, maybe that doesn't mean that you're evil entirely. And they let people be left-handed, and then, the numbers of left-handed people skyrocketed. It's just that. And, the thing with Maher is that he makes up these things, these scenarios that do not happen, that are not a thing that happens commonly at all, and then gets very mad at the thing he just made up. Like, he's imagining there are just legions of children who, like, say one day, I think I might be questioning my gender, and then they send them right to the surgeon immediately and hack off all of their body parts. Like, just penises everywhere. just strewn across the, streets of California. And that's what he's trying to claim is going on here. And it's very obviously not. Like, that's not happening. That's not how any of this works. It's very rare for kids to get surgery, for the same reason that I couldn't get a breast reduction when I was in high school, because they're like, you're not done growing yet. We need to see where you're going to be in order to, figure this out. And then I never bothered because I'm scared of surgery. But like, this isn't happening. It's not, people are not just, not caring whether or not it's true. And that's what I think bothers me the most. He's assuming that everyone doesn't care if it's, these kids are actually trans. They're like, oh, you want to follow this trend? Super cool. We'll just get that taken care of entirely. That's not how gender affirming therapy works.
And it's trying to spin the parents who are supportive, instead of being monsters, as just using their children for cool cred in their circles. It's like, let me butcher my child. It is very strange, considering trans children are still one of the most vulnerable and still the most
absolutely
targeted. But it's something you and I discussed with Claire a while back. A lot of the stories that are told still is to present, if you were to see the trans kid is the parent, has the cool parents, they live in LA and they live in a brown, it's presenting it as always an upper class issue, as opposed to it isn't. They're like just some, a trans person who just wants to live and have a job.
Because that's actually who has access to medical care and therapy.
Yeah, exactly, and that as well. Yeah. So, but it is easier to, because then it's a presumption that you're punching up, right? You're looking at what these weird rich people do, as opposed to, and that's along Dave Chappelle, who I think the comedian John Mulaney had brought out as a surprise at his show, which to me is a somewhat unfair bait switch, because there's like trans people who went to this guy's show thinking they would not be harassed. Yes, they deliberately did not buy tickets to a Dave Chappelle show, and he came out, and he doesn't even have an act anymore. He just doesn't it's not even like Andrew Dice Clay had an act. I mean, it wasn't a great one, but it was like, here's my persona, here's my, there's
it's a shit.
Here's what I'm doing. This is just a very angry rich guy hating trans people, and some of the most boring stuff as well. Like, well, I would identify as Chinese, and he does an anti-Chinese thing, and I would identify as a woman if I was arrested, so I could go to a women's prison, and then I would assault women. Like, well, that's your issue, Dave. Like, that's not what's happening. And for actual, femme presenting women, femme presenting men was very difficult in prison. It's not great shakes, so, or as you would say, it's not a great time. So it's just very frustrating right now, because these are the groups who are under attack, and we just have these very spoiled idiot comedians who, and there's somewhat of a classist issue there, because for even including Ricky Gervais, so all of these folks, we think they have something of merit to say because of their class they're in. Whereas deep down, what they're saying is like something Archie Bunker or Al Bundy would say, but because they were kind of working class stiffs, we were meant to deliberately laugh at them. They're idiots. What they're saying is stupid. But here it's somehow, maybe that Bill Maher has a point. Well, no, he doesn't. He doesn't know. He's just this old guy who the world has moved past him, and he's just refusing to grow and to change, which is the whole joke with Bundy and with others. But for him, it's like, oh yeah, he's politically incorrect. He says it like it is or something. So that's, to me, remarkable.
Well, because apparently people only think mean things and don't say them. And, and then there are these people who do say them. And I don't think that that's actually true. I think people are very comfortable saying mean things pretty much all of the time, in my experience. What I'd like to go back to, though, is the whole oh man, if we allow people to be trans, they're going to go into women's prisons and assault women. are already people in prisons assaulting women. They're the guards. They're the people who are hired to, work there. And it's very, very disingenuous to me because for the most part, Americans do not care what happens to people in prison. Like, no fucks given. I lost my mind today because I found out for the first time about prison rodeos, which I did not realize was a thing because I don't even think I was entirely sure that rodeos were a thing, if you want the truth. I thought it was just kind of something that happened on TV. But they're like people, they pay the prisoners who are untrained in this $15 to go and possibly die or get gored and be in these get attacked by bulls and things like that. It's like the gladiators or something like that, but not really because these people have zero training. It's horrifying. And there are all these people in the audience just watching that. And people are okay with that. They're like, you know what? Fun time for the whole family. Let's go watch some people possibly die. Get your popcorn out, maybe, wear your special cowboy hat. This is in Louisiana at Angora Prison. And, every time anything you ever read about prison is horrifying. Oh, yeah. And the only thing they ever care about is, how can we actually use this to make trans people feel more othered? Like, how do we do that? Because that's the only way in which, it matters that people are sexually assaulted in prison. Because half of the people complaining about this are the exact people who love to make jokes about don't drop the soap. Like, it's totally fine that people get sexually assaulted in prison.
No, that's part of the punishment. Otherwise, it's all like being in Goodfellas, where you're just making great dinners all day and it's fun and it's pleasant. It has to be, this has to happen to you. I mean, it's very disingenuous. I mean, Republicans will be the first. Dr. Rachel Levine, when she got an honor as a trans woman, all these Republicans were talking about a war on women and how this diminished other women because this man had come in and which then they would be the first to, when the new press secretary comes out and mentions that she's the first Black woman, lesbian, to have this, then it's like, we're not interested in your identity.
No, identity politics.
Then, well, what is it? Then why would you care that Rachel Levine was noted as being? It should still be the same BS to you.
So, they only ever care about things to the point where they can use it as a cudgel to hurt some other group.
Well, I mean, you've said before that they're very good at, and you have to come in and challenge that by talking about the actual victims here, because they spin these things as something horrible that these trans kids are doing to women and protecting women's sports and all sorts of stuff. And you've got to humanize it on our end and not necessarily go from perhaps the sort of arrogant standpoint of how ridiculous your argument is, because they're from an emotional argument. You got to challenge a weird emotion with emotion. I think part of that was this week, there was the congressional hearings, abortion-related congressional hearings. I don't know how much if you watched, and they had the one
that I can stomach it.
Yes, I mean, it's a lot of it is just absurd. But there was one anti-choice advocate, this woman who was talking about apparently DC was powering electricity with
incinerating babies to power the streetlights or something,
which is fundamentally insane, right? But
yes,
you've got to counter that with or all of their, my wife, I notices whenever someone comes with these ridiculous arguments about, well, what if the baby's halfway out and woman wants an abortion, can they have the abortion then? And you've got to hit that with, we're not killing babies, and here's the actual things that occur, the heartbreaking stories that women have to go through, or people who are pregnant who to challenge that, because it's my, and it's not mansplaining, it's my wife's opinion as well, if you come of this is absurd, I'm not even going to answer that question, it's sort of, you look like Spock, or everyone's talking about baby killers. You've got to because there is a lot of humanity of these stories of what even a lot of people just aren't aware of that happens.
There's so much, because it is a human story. Because yes, every person who can get pregnant has it in their head, all the time what they would do if they got pregnant. Like there's, from the moment that you can have a baby, that is, and you're sexually active, even if you're not, that is something that you are aware of. Whether you're like, I would definitely keep it, whether I would have it and give it up for adoption, or whether it's I would run out and get an abortion ASAP. People know. Like if it's something that's going to happen to you, you know. So a lot of, it was kind of odd that, you know, a lot of these people were women because, you know, it's like, you know, and you know that no one's really the goal for these people really, I think, is to just portray people who have abortions as being evil and cruel and just really into killing babies as badly as possible. Like they're like, you know, I want to stab a baby in the head as it's coming out of the birth canal because I hate babies. I want to, you know, be pregnant for 9 months and then just murder that baby as soon as it comes out. Or throw it in the nearest dumpster or toilet if you want to go by moral panics of 20 years ago. It's just this, the goal is to portray people as being cold and cruel and selfish, and that's the only reason why they have abortions.
Yes, I'm. As actually, there is a similar story of that occurring. It was one of the first one of the few homicides on the University of Georgia campus. Marjorie Green herself might mention it at some point because she was there at the time where, you know, the baby was abandoned. But those are horrible. That's someone, you know, the solution, you're not going to decrease the situations that those occurring by making it impossible to have abortions, or these laws are nuts. Everyone's doubling down. I saw Herschel Walker, who's most likely going to be, well, potentially the next senator, Georgia. I mean, given the climate of this year, but let's hold out hope. He is the going to run away with the. He's like has like a 75% of primary voting electorate in Georgia, but he has said no, absolutely no exceptions. I mean, they've doubled down on this, which is just sort of revealing. I think a lot of Democrats were sort of like, okay, well, maybe we can at least get them to agree to this. And as I've said, it's like, well, no, they're already in the House, so they're taking all this. There's no more negotiation now. They're in the House. They've taken out the security. They're taking all the shit, and they're going to leave now. So that was sort of a given. You
like, just leave the next China.
Yeah, no, we're in now. We might have negotiated if you just handed us the TV to not take the China, but now that we're in. But you'd written last week about the going after birth control as well. The one person's like, no, which to me,
oh yeah, they're absolutely going after birth control because it was never about fetuses. They don't care about fetuses or like, you know, born human beings. They don't care. That should be very obvious. They just really, 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 and I'd say they want to, you know, control women. And yes, that's true, but they want to control everyone. They want to control how people are having sex. They also want to control how men have sex, how everyone how like non-binary people have sex. They want control over that. Because that's how you control people. You know, that's how you know, really, like if you're really like, I want to, you know, have a really authoritarian society, you start dictating what kind of sex people can have. And they want to get rid of birth control. They want to get rid of same-sex marriage because what they want are people like cis men and cis women getting married, whether or not they like each other, and only having sex to procreate. And that is the ultimate goal. And also being forced to be Christian because apparently that is also up for grabs now.
Does not seem, you know, there's this whole there was a long-standing argument, either often from Democrats, often from the moderate Republicans who would be part of the party and now are like shocked. It's like you get the, you know, Tim Miller, who's gay, and others who are like, well, even though I was helping these, you know, lunatics get office before Trump, and their politics are about the same as Trump's. But
Yeah.
I never thought they would do this. It's like, oh, come on. But there's this whole idea that this was something
Leopards, faces.
that this is something that could be leveraged for the larger Ayn Rand stuff, as if this history of the entire Americas leads to like Ayn Rand landing here and having dinner with India. Like that wasn't what happened, right? The Puritans, like if you trace everything back, it's like religious extremists were kind of that's the sort of the flower of this nation.
Yeah.
And to not kind of recognize that and to be shocked that America might actually become overtly a religious authoritarian society just doesn't make sense to me. Like, well, yeah, like that seems to trace all the way back. That tracks to me.
And they're scared right now because, the numbers of religious people are declining. So they're looking at the whole world and they're saying, like, we're losing everything. We have to take control now, and it's going to be really bad. Like all of this shit with the education and everything, they're like, we're losing our country. We need to get it back. Our kids need to be bigots. Everyone needs to go to church. And, we're just going to be super extreme so that, they'll, shoot for the moon and they'll land among the stars is basically where they're going with this.
Oh, absolutely. And
can't say they don't know how to negotiate.
Well,
they don't negotiate, but yeah.
They have no need to. There was a poll, CBS News had a poll recently, like most Americans agree that Republicans are extremists, but they think Democrats are weak. And, part of it is this idea of like helping this pursuit of bipartisanship, which is very Beltway media pundits are saying it looks like you're compromising with evil. You can't how do you say these people are imposing Jim Crow voting laws, and now we're going to go meet at the White House to discuss bridges, or I'm going to invite Susan Collins and some others to discuss my Supreme Court pick, even though they're a part of a party of fascists. It does read as weak. And, again, the blue MAGA trolls disagree. They believe you've got to that what we do is fine. The best way to convince Republicans to vote against Republicans is to talk about how great Republicans used to be. And even though that's never worked, even though whenever Democrats have tried with that, it's failed, as you have said, well, what if it didn't? And that's
because that provides the more satisfying story. It's a more satisfying narrative. It's what people want to hear. And so therefore it's better to fail and try that than it is to have actual results. And that is the story of the United States.
The adults in the room, arrogance. I remember
we've never been right about anything in the history of ever. I'm just gonna say
the adults in the room really are. I mean, this one person had commented, was frustrated that Chris Hayes had talked about, I think, what Democrats could do to score a win, for Biden to score a win in this election. And Chris Hayes is, a lot of people, it's not right about, I'm not a stan of his, but a lot of people really hold him accountable for that, I guess being somewhat pro Sanders, I guess, during 2016. So generally speaking, he's sort of persona non grata around some of these folks. But regardless, the idea was like, oh, he's just slamming Democrats about this win. What if the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan bill, is a huge win? Why don't everyone sing from the heavens about it? And yes, there's some good things there, and no one's denying that. But it would seem like, well, your win is something that Mitch McConnell permitted.
Yeah.
Makes it somewhat less of a win. And, this idea of like whatever Democrats are in charge, their best win is whatever Mitch McConnell will approve. It does get demoralizing or dispiriting when right now Republicans, when they sing Trump's praises, the one thing, the big saving grace, so you get the one guy who even someone who voted to impeach him, to justify why they supported him ever, even in 2020, was the tax cuts, which not even Manchin voted for. It was a complete party line reconciliation bill. So you do get the sense of, okay, well, why, when we're in power, the best we can do is what Mitch McConnell will permit. And when
Mhm.
Republicans are in power, they, they pass things. It's not about getting Pelosi's and Schumer's approval. They actually tie them to a chair and say, here's all the awful things we're going to do, and I'm going to do it right in front of you. Here's what we're going to do,
Yeah,
the tax cuts and whatever, with the ACA repeal being what they failed to do. But their big event was, this is something that the other side decidedly didn't want. So the big events that Dems tried to do against, like Build Back Better or so forth, they just was not successful at getting past when Republicans were united against it. So I can see why that is not perceived as a win, though, again, if the voters aren't feeling it, then maybe
mhm.
there's a problem. And I need to tell them how some of this stuff, like, I think it's great that there's going to be some potential for broadband at places and so forth. But also at the same time, there's already record heat waves this weekend, pretty
Mhm.
early in the Northeast, where you are, it's like 100-degree days and so forth. And like in the climate, that was our last shot at climate change. And when you have a coal baron as the head of your
Yeah.
energy committee, that's going to happen. That's fine. But those are like a lot of serious type of stuff that people would feel, oh, this is our chance to sort of do something, but we weren't able to. We could only really do what Mitch McConnell would say, okay, this will help Kentucky. I'll let you have this. And that's
Yeah.
somewhat discouraging. Um, but
Because then
yes,
it gets to be their win too, and then
yeah, like go
what
ahead
is
and
anyone running on?
go ahead and try to sell it. I mean, I'm all for it. I'm not like, I think those are positive things. Unfortunately, gas prices and supply chain issues and there's a lot of immediate pressure and strain. And I think I sent you that article earlier about disinformation and how there's this perception that whenever voters are upset about something or believe something's a priority or reacted in ways that often liberals did not believe they should react, they were just brainwashed. Which, um, if you know anything about human nature at all, no one likes being told that they're a rube or a mark or
Yeah.
just like it is not just not an effective. But that seems to be like post Trump, like post 2016, that's been the response. I mean, what's been your view of that? As it seems like the sense of like these guys are all brainwashed and
I
idiot.
mean, so here's my take on that. I think that the discussions and explanations of disinformation are extremely important. I do, because I think not necessarily so we can be like, haha, you're stupid, but more so that we can understand how these things happen and why these people think these things, which I think is more important, because that's what you need to counter.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, I tend to be a person who is very like, okay, well, why are these people doing this? Where is their head at? And there's a lot of sort of reactions against that, because we're just supposed to be like, okay, no, we don't need to understand them. They're totally bad, and they're doing this because they're bad. And yeah, you won't get any argument from me that people are assholes. I will fully support that every time. But I do think that it's important to see, like, okay, what was the trajectory here? And like, how did they get to this point where this was believable to them? Why are certain things more believable than others? You know, because I don't think people are, that super different. I think part of the reason why conspiracy theories are so popular is because they make people feel smart, and they make them feel like they understand very complicated, messy systems that are, you know, that there isn't just like an explanation for it, like, oh, it was just the New World Order. Um,
Mhm.
they were playing some tricks on you. Someone's a lizard person. And it's easier to believe those simple explanations because everything being a mess is not A, interesting, and B, that just means that no one can do anything about anything. And I think where it needs to go is less just like fact checking, which I still think is important. That should always be a thing for everyone, but more to like, what is the root of this? Where is this coming from? Where do these ideas originally come from? Because most of them are recycled, like from, years and years and years ago. Half of the shit these people believe all comes from a woman named Kathy O'Brien, who claims to have been a CIA MK Ultra sex slave. To, by the way, Ronald Reagan, partially. So they ignore that part. They ignore the part where she talks about how much Ronald Reagan liked watching her have sex with a donkey. Yeah.
Was that just political imagery?
Yeah.
Or just he was into donkeys, or was supposed to represent Democrats?
It's just shit that she made up, like that she remembered from her time as a brainwashed MK Ultra Project Monarch sex slave. Mainly to Robert Byrd, but also to George Bush the First, Ronald Reagan, a country music ventriloquist, a variety of people, really. Not sure what was up with the ventriloquist, but
well, it's interesting because we are very siloed as people now, either for our entertainment and our news and culturally, regionally. But to the extent when they talk about sort of the liberal elite or elitism in generals or whatever, I mean, part of it is that sense of it's about trust. So if I trust you, I'm less inclined to believe horrible things. If I know you and trust you, I won't. And it's one of those things that we've seen as a challenge with, and you've written about this, sometimes the reflexive trust women, which I think should trust women, obviously, but when someone would be like, oh my God, this woman's a race traitor, or a gender traitor because she isn't immediately believing these charges against this person she worked with or knew very well this whole time. And it's not, I don't think it's just that this person is a hypocrite or fraud. It's just that if you know someone, it's very hard to imagine, especially if you don't know the other person. We're all human beings, right? So you just be like, I heard something like, well, no, I mean, Robyn wouldn't do that. And that's your immediate response. It doesn't mean that I don't trust people. It's just like, well, I have trouble believing this. So I think we've gotten to this point where for so many different, no one knows or trusts a lot of Democrats or a lot of people in power. So they're inclined to believe the worst about them. I don't know how you counter that or what the infrastructure is, but I think that's part of what you need to figure out, rather than, I think, to the point saying Russia did it and then moving on, because that's not enough, because you've got to figure out. And a lot of the response has been, after 2016, a lot of the response to what was happening in a lot of these places, and you've written about, like, obviously it was very clear why there was this rejection of Democrat. The Rust Belt collapsed, and you've kind of had a clear. It doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with that and say, okay, yes, let's do whatever Robyn says. But it felt like people these highly paid, people like Carville and Dell or whatever would say, oh, well, clearly what happened, why we all lost is because, well, maybe we talked too much about women's issues, or maybe we, did too much of this, or didn't, kiss the cop's ass enough. And it was all a sort of, so essentially the answer was always to do more, to double down on Tim Kaine-ness, even though he was literally on the ticket. But that's your answer to what happened. And so to me, that's not particularly effective, right? It needs to be sort of how did we lose here? How did we lose the trust of people who are just like, I don't believe that you can fix things.
Well, I think that when people do try to seem overly perfect, people automatically distrust them. And I think that's, on some level a human thing. And I think that, there was a little bit of that going on, like when people are a little too polished.
I mean,
people are like, what's up with you? you know.
That's interesting because a lot of my friends and myself as well have never have like beaten Chuck Todd over the head about his over prepared comment about one of the debates with Hillary Clinton, that she was over prepared and it was how the most sexist thing to ever say. And I thought it was ridiculous and absurd. It's like, well, of course you should be prepared. You're the president of the United States. The only way to put that in perhaps some degree of a more of a positive spin based on what you're saying is that it does go to a sense of looking as if everything I've said I'm not having an authentic thought. Everything I'm saying has been was tested, approved. You don't know. Whereas this guy is telling it like it is and from where he should, from an authentic place. Granted, that authentic place is crazy, but it just seems persistently people are going to choose authenticity over fabrication.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe is there a way to offer good authenticity? But I think that's been the challenge of
exactly. And I think that there is a lot of good authenticity and that people shouldn't be afraid of that. Mm-hmm. Because that's also how you communicate, like we were talking earlier, the emotional side of things. Like you can't just like list off statistics or be like, this is wrong because of this. And if we do this, it will fix it. And I get it because I kind of tend to be like that about certain things. Or I will get mad that, people are really insistent on doing things a stupid way because it is emotionally satisfying to them. That bothers me. But I think that what we need more are people who are able to, be super authentic. Not that I'm saying I'm fake, but like who actually make mistakes, because I hate to say it, but like the more you make mistakes, the more people are endeared to you, sort of. I mean, not like massive, you're a horrible person mistakes, but like if you get toilet paper attached to the bottom of your shoe and you're like, oh, this is a fashion statement that I meant to make, rather than like, oh my God, I'm super embarrassed. This was the wrong thing to do. I can never live this down because I'm supposed to be perfect. People are going to be like, there's something wrong with you, and there must be something worse wrong with you than even that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that's been a struggle and a challenge, I think, of perceived authenticity has been like, oh, this candidate, I'm not going to name candidates to get down this road, but this candidate is to, I think also perhaps because unfortunately, because to me, I think you can be, I don't think it's ideological, right? Like, I don't think you have to, mean you have to, the only authentic people are people as liberal as I am or more so. I think it is just so happens that a lot of folks who were perhaps, more moderate in the route to sort of what in legal terms, partner track, right? Your hacking case is like, you're on track for this, and here's everything you need to do to be on track for this. Same with people like Lauren or Underwood or others who are noted. It's like, here's what you do, keep your head down, you say these things and whatever. And of course, and all the big important people are going to come to you early and train you and steer you on that path. So you're going to be part of that sort of machinery, right? And the folks who kind of snuck in through the back door, like the AOCs or whatever, are going to have a different way of doing things. But it doesn't mean it only has to be the liberals or left. I would love if there were more moderates who would just come out overtly as, because I mean, to me, it was just, there was this whole thing to talk about the primaries, the Pennsylvania primary, this whole thing of Fetterman versus Lamb. And it wasn't even to, like the candidate you like, but it was weird to me, this idea that Lamb, who presents as a sort of Romney light guy, like the guy in the suit, you put him in a lineup with Paul Ryan or whatever. And he's the guy.
I still cannot picture what he looks like in my head. Like, I'll look at him and then I'll close my eyes and try and picture him, and it doesn't work. Like, his face does not stay in my head. There's a particular kind of man that I have like some sort of, they'll always maybe be the same person to me. It's why I couldn't watch Chicago PD. I tried to watch it. I'm like, all of these white men are the same white man. I don't
you're saying that Connor Lamb is the silence from Doctor Who.
Yes.
Like, so you stop looking at him.
I have Connor Lamb face blindness.
But yeah, my point, but it was this idea that he was the one who was gonna, but like Pennsylvania's had this rural air, like it was this insistence again of like, look, if you like this candidate and you like this guy, I'm sure he's a decent, perfectly charming, nice fellow, but it's just, why are we in denial about what's happened? Like what, like the Lauren Bobarts, the Marcella Greens, the Matt Gaetz, the candidates who are winning, and often they are winning in these rural areas. So it's not about, you know, the suburb, like any Democrat is going to, at this point, do pretty well in the suburbs, right? We're talking about trying to hold down margins to rural areas. They will say that. So Democrats will say it. And we're like, oh yeah, we agree. We need to hold down those rural numbers. And then they sort of nominate guys who, and look, this is not about, and everyone's going to bring up Fetterman's issues with the shotgun incident or why I don't like Fetterman. And I am not standing Fetterman or supporting. I'm just saying, I grew up in a very rural working class area in the South, right? Rural working class. The people, the white people I knew would present. So I would see people mocking him for like, how dare he show up in a hoodie or shorts, and mocking how he dressed or whatever.
Yeah.
That's how my white classmate's dad would look at a PTA night, because he was coming from a job or coming back from like it. That's what white people looked like. You know, there are people on TV, but this is what white people looked like when I was growing up. I didn't meet a guy like Connor Lamb until college. Like that's when I was in a world of where I'm meeting guys who presented that, white guys who presented that way. I knew they existed. And, you know, if you went to the doctor's office, right, and there was a neighborhood you could go near, they lived in that neighborhood. But the people, the white people who worked with my dad and who worked in whatever were the guys who look, which is sort of weird because it's often well-off white liberals will think, to presume on my behalf, that the sort of working class looking guy, it's like, oh, isn't he scary? He's racist. It's like, well, no, that guy looks to me like someone I knew and grew up around.
Yeah.
This guy is the one who was like,
because they think of them as being more scary.
Yes, exactly. There, and you know, that's, so if you're trying to reach, you know, and again, this isn't even about Fetterman himself. It is just about finding candidates who represent. So when you, and I think again, that was also an issue where if you didn't like him, and it's fine to not like him, but then it became everything about him. So now if you
crackers.
Exactly. So the worst thing now is a candidate who doesn't, you know, who's wearing a hoodie or has a beard or is a big guy or looks like a trucker, and those we don't like this. It's like, well, it's okay to not like him, but maybe normal people are important, and you can, you know, and
saying like anyone who looks like that is trash. We're not those kind of people.
Exactly how it sounds like. It doesn't resonate.
People who vote for people who look like that are like, oh, okay, I guess I'm trash then.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump, I mean, everyone would double down about he's really laughing at you. And it would just be like well-off people like Pelosi saying, yeah, Trump is laughing at you. It's like, well, he's the one, you're the one making fun of the fact that he eats steak well done with ketchup. Whereas goes around these guys and does this, and they're like, yeah, this is our guy. He likes McDonald's or Burger King, and he's got like a model wife, and he drives a private jet. He's our guy. And it was like challenging them in the weirdest ways. So all I'm saying is try to rethink whatever it is you think that is sort of, and that could be anyone. But again, we're sort of obsessed as Democrats with like, perfect, as you say, perfection. And everyone will be like, oh, you are my God, and you're perfect, and you're wonderful, and you're the best.
People don't like that.
Now, they want someone who seems like, and Katie Porter was that way. She ran afoul of leadership. I think she did something wrong. Hard to keep track of it, but she, you know, was the one to say like, this issues with inflation are real. People are really hurting. The gas prices, people are really hurting, and she had to really convince Democratic leadership that it was a real problem. They were all kind of like, oh well, blah blah blah, and these PowerPoints. It's like, you're just missing an emotional issue. The emotional issue is that people are paying more than they were before, and it is a direct line. They pay more in gas, they're gonna get upset. And I used to see like someone posted their only response, this blue MAGA guy, was that, well, gas prices are up across the world. What can Biden do about it? It's just like, well, if someone's hurting and your response is, look, what can I do? What can I do? I can't. Come on, Robyn. Am I supposed to have a magic
Yeah.
wand? It's like, okay, well, the problem with that is that someone else is going to come in and say, well, I have a magic wand.
Yeah.
So your Republicans are promising that gas is going to be $2, you know,
I'm trying
by
to think of who it is. Actually, I think it's kind of a more moderate candidate who's talking about giving people $250 rebates to, like, for each car that they have up to 4 cars. I'm like, that's actually a pretty good idea. You know,
yeah. And
like it's not a permanent solution, but
I know that I know who you're talking about, and I'm also blanking on the name. Uh, but I agree, and there was again some liberals who, well, who just like, oh, that's the worst thing ever, and but you've got to do something because the bad
yeah,
guys are going to say, I'm going to make it all great and wonderful. And I think sometimes there's this political response of, I've called it negging is not effective response. Whereas I say, Robyn, you don't deserve better. So you're kind of like, I'm not happy in this relationship. It's like, you don't deserve better. You don't deserve to even think. You're ridiculous to think that you could ever get better. Well, of course, the person
yeah,
who comes along and say, well, actually, you do deserve better, Robyn, I'm going to give it to you, is probably you're going to be like,
yeah,
well,
because they
listen,
should.
yeah. So like that's never, so this whole idea of like, oh, I don't have a magic wand or anything, or we can't, which is just sort of it's a weird concept because
Like,
the
try.
idea, yeah, well, the Democrats should be the ones stating that like the ability to use government effectively to improve people's lives should be something that we can do. Whenever you're saying that you can't, and that was a weird thing that Trump did, where he would sort of combine capitalism with government. So he would be like, well, I'm just going to call the head of the gas. I'm going to call Shell Oil and say, yeah, lower the prices now. And then he'll lower the prices. And it wouldn't happen, right? But it was this
Yeah,
idea of I am doing something, and you build
because
this.
they think that like a tough guy can do that. Like they think that that is a thing that can happen, and that's something that they unfortunately have going for them, even if it never actually happens.
I think that's right. I think it was Newsom
Yeah,
who recommended the gas. Yeah, you've got to do something. People are really hurting, and I always say I listen to people who
hmm,
had voted for Biden or Democrats or would vote for Biden. So a lot of Black folks. There's one guy in Portland who had opened a restaurant, had to close it because of just the cost of everything. There are people who's their not just their livelihoods but their dreams. So like especially in the restaurant business, like this is something I'm so excited about doing, and this because of what's happened this year because of the inflationary prices, it went up in
hmm,
flames. And so I think a lot of people are hurting and upset, and so you've got to figure out um, a way to address that beyond telling them that they shouldn't expect anything better. Or
yeah.
so, um, was there anything more beyond what would happen with the abortion testimony? So, I mean, these laws have been getting crazy. They've been seizing on passing more kind of this total
Yeah,
ban.
well, I mean, it's getting bad. It's getting really bad. Um, uh, Oklahoma just passed one of the most restrictive bans that is basically making all abortion illegal. Louisiana is throwing people in, like they want to like charge people with homicide, which, man, let me tell you, is going to be pretty scary. There are going to be a lot of people in prison, and there are already a lot of people in prison in Louisiana, and their prisons are pretty scary. But it's going to be a lot worse. They also have an extremely, both states have a very, very high maternal mortality rate. Louisiana's is the highest in the country, like one of the highest in the world, I think, at this point. Um, And so people are going to die. People are going to end up in prison. It's going to be a giant garbage fire. And the thing is, well-off people are going to be able to mostly ignore it the way that they ignore everything else. And the thing that scares me the most about all of this is that most things aren't going to change for most of the people that currently like things aren't going to change for most people that are living in states where, you know, they have abortion access. The states that are making it illegal already have not had abortion access for a very long time. It's very difficult to get an abortion there.
Well, that's
Mississippi's one clinic is operated by a couple people from, you know, Massachusetts who come down like every so often and perform a bunch of abortions in a weekend. Like, it's not good.
Well, and that's what they're counting on. These are states that, you know, either through either gerrymandering or outright voter suppression, or just, you know, I've often said Black people are like kryptonite to white people. So there's enough of us, they just go crazy, like crazy kryptonite. So in the South, there's like 20 or, you know, there's not enough for us to really change the voting patterns if we all vote for Democrats, but there's enough of us in those states, including my home state, to make all the white people crazy. So they overwhelmingly support some of the worst stuff possible. And in those states, they're already this idea that had happened for a while, and it was always concerning to me. I'm sure it was to you, that there'd be this, you know, uprising if Roe was overturned. It's like, well, the worst states are GOP states, and solidly, that's not going to change. Like, you know, South Carolina's not going to flip. It's not, you know, Val Demings isn't going to win in Florida because of this. Like, that's not going to be decisive for her to beat Rubio and so forth. And then in like the states where there is abortion access that will remain, I mean, it does create the illusion. I mean, potentially, if there's an overreach, you get a nationwide abortion ban. But it's already structured so that it's a limit. I mean, California is often on fire, and a major state that has like this could be its own nation state, right? Is prevented from doing anything, prevent these deaths, the property damage, because of West Virginia. And the power Joe Manchin has, which is West Virginia is like probably the population of one of their most minor, you know, a relatively small city in California, but he's able to trump the efforts to help that's needed. And according to Oregon and wildfires, so we're kind of held the kind of Senate and the Electoral College has kind of pinned us on that. So even there's a nationwide abortion ban, like, okay, well, Republicans could continue losing all senators. What does it matter? Still only 2 senators in California. Still only.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone could move from those states who didn't, you know, like what was going on there, and they'd still have the exact same amount of power they do now. And that's they don't care.
There's 3 people. I mean, Wyoming is lovely to drive through because you just push. I highly recommend it. You push cruise control and you chill. It's like just a straight shot. It's wonderful, low stress. But there's 8 people there, and they have, and 2 of them are senators. I mean, that's an insane situation, but it makes it of like how they're, you know, it is scary as to the power, the way the power structure is. Republicans are sort of gamed on this, and I don't know, the idea that there would be this backlash. There's been more backlash over police reform than over harm to reproductive freedom or reproductive access and what's happening. So and there was this other story about how you know, putting a lie to Democratic statements about voter suppression, voter turnout in Georgia seems, it's like, well, you know, I crawled across glass to vote. You know, that's how I have to vote now, to crawl across glass and then like juggle.
Someone did it. Everything's fine.
It's like, well,
no, it's still very bad.
It's still like a white person, you know, can just jog over on their lunch break and vote, and I've got to like put out a whole day and take a day off to vote is inherently unfair. Maybe we should not do that. But there's this whole idea of like, no, democracy. And again, I swear to you, just in advance, if I see those tweets with photos of my people standing in line and for out like long lines, like, James Brown.
Without water.
Yeah, like James Brown and Prince came back from the dead for a concert and we're standing in line for that. Like, if I see that with a tweet being like, democracy, smiley face, I will lose my shit because that is not democracy. That's complete BS.
The exact opposite of that.
Yes, as the coal tax is a bad thing. So.
But white people really like being inspired by Black people struggling.
Yeah. It's so true, right? Like there's this stuff like that's such a wonderful story.
Something.
Yeah, and it's just, and I want to, like I said, I want to celebrate the Black people who do well.
Yeah.
And so with Jackson, like the story, but it's always spun as she did it. Look at this Black lady, she went to the Ivy League, this, and it's great, and that's the story, and I feel so good. Like they felt that way about Obama. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And when you would say, well, racism still exists, and there's still things we need to kind of address and deal with, everyone would be very teed off about it and so forth. So
that's not fair.
So Pennsylvania, it went on and on. Like, so it was slam bam, thank you, Nam, on the Democratic side. That was called early, but the Republican one dragged out.
It's still going. They're gonna have to do a recount.
It looks like it could be. Although Trump did as usual, just declare victory.
Yeah.
You're ahead. It's like because he'll never learn, not because he was never held accountable for anything. But so I love that Oz was literally thanking Sean Hannity for his support. Like we've just accepted that cable news is fully in bed with, and there's not like, it just seems like, well, this is fundamentally wrong, right? Like this guy is just clearly just, it's not even like I am, because we're certainly in the tank for certain candidates, right? Like we would gladly have Liz Warren, if you're listening, or AOC, come on in, we'll talk to you, whatever. But it is not like, it just feels like he is just open, like in close contact. He's a completely part of that machine, just like he was part of the machine during the shoot or whatever, of just, here's the press release. So he was pushing Oz, potentially probably did get Oz, looks like over the finish line. And it's Pennsylvania's scary because you've got the governor who is clearly a seditionist insurrection supporter who it doesn't matter. Like Biden could win by 5 points in Pennsylvania. If he is governor, Mistriano's governor, he is not going to certify that win. Yeah. And so, and God forbid anyone protests outside the governor's house, that'd be mean, right? Like that's my whole response to this is just like, there's this sense of,
by the way, a lot of the Trump people weirdly really hate Mastriano. I'm not sure why. I think one of the things is they think he looks ethnic looking, because I kept seeing, no, I don't think he does, but they were like tweeting pictures of him and being like, physiognomy matters, which is usually what they say about Jewish people. So like, or Black people. That's, should I explain what that is?
He, Trump went in and supported him last minute to look like he was a kingmaker. And there was another candidate in the running who had very early on supported Trump and been supportive. And so obviously, in a shock to everyone, Trump was not loyal to him. So I think that's some of that. Same with Oz, right? Like Oz is not.
Oz is very not popular among the like conspiracy people. So it'll actually be not interesting, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out.
I desperately hope. I mean, can you imagine, like JD Vance Dr. Oz and Herschel
Yeah,
Walker in the Senate,
I
like, so
know, I know, I know.
it's just like,
Um,
where the smart table of the Republican caucus would be Tommy Tuberville and Marshall Blackburn is not. That's a bad scene.
yeah.
So
Well,
God,
yeah,
I hope to God that we can pull it out and keep Oz out and keep that governor's seat with Shapiro, because again, if it's all over if he's governor, because Pennsylvania's off the table. And I say this because I think a lot of the reaction to Roe from the Democrats and just the sense of trying to play it by the old games reminds me of like the question, what would have happened if Trump had succeeded in overturning the election?
mhm,
And I think a lot of Republicans are watching this and say, oh yeah, they would have done shit.
yeah,
We would have said, okay, yeah, we've won. It's inherently unfair. And they would just send you some fundraising emails. They would, have a big speech about, oh my goodness, this is terrible. But, next time. And
yeah.
so there's that
Vote.
sense like, what can we do? Yeah, what can we do? Because God forbid you protest, you make a Supreme Court justice uncomfortable when he's, you know, uh, actively tried. And Ginny Thomas, there's more news about her, how she tried to get Arizona's electors. I mean, it's just nuts. Like she's actively
Yeah.
a seditionist, and she.
And her husband is on the Supreme Court, possibly and will be making decisions about people who share her values, and has. No, that's not too good. Maybe the Supreme Court is bad.
Yeah, I mean, we need big picture stuff of how to fix it, and I don't. I know I sound. It's what just like obviously vote. Obviously vote. My concern is when that is no like if we don't. I think our last chance is with Mastriano, but I mean, I think and Connor Lamb gave a pretty classy concession speech and talking about how democracy is at stake and we gotta vote. But isn't it tiresome to be like where the other side we just
Democracy is at stake from who we don't know. It's a mystery.
well the other side these Republicans are overtly evil but we can't just call it like so it's just a sense of like every election democracy at stake because Republicans are inherently corrupt. And maybe a few Republicans will be nice and be less corrupt, but overtly it's bad. Like no one, I mean, and we're the ones who are just like, oh, if we push
We're better than Brand X. Like,
better than Brand
more
X.
absorbent than Brand X.
Yeah, it's some scary. So Robyn, you're of Italian descent, if I am correct. So, what do you think of this other scandal shaping the world? The woman Meryl Streep played on in the movie so well, Anna Wintour apparently had her lunch is like was a
Oh, yeah.
steak and a caprese
I,
salad, but not a caprese salad because it was just mozzarella and basil, no tomatoes.
yeah.
Is that
No, that's like not a caprese salad.
it's not a caprese, the
And
ingredients.
this is the thing. The only reason I give a shit is because I don't feel that people should be encouraged to make caprese sandwiches wrong, which they often do. And it's really a blight upon society. I have been to places that sell caprese sandwiches with layers and layers of arugula and also once lettuce. And that was a really upsetting moment for me. I'm like, it should not be crunchy. I'm not looking.
It's like it's basil.
Yeah.
Fresh.
It's just basil, mozzarella, tomatoes, olive oil. Maybe if you want to get crazy, put a little you know, vinegar on it. And like I like the balsamic glaze. A little saucy.
What's the
But
bread?
no, you don't go further than that.
But what's the bread do you prefer when you get the caprese?
It depends. Usually I just do it on like a ciabatta roll at home. Like you can put it on like panini bread, which is just, Italian bread. That's large. Pretty much anything really like is like I don't I mean my dad puts it on wheat because he does not eat white bread. But that's not really what matters, I think. I like a crusty bread, but as much as the actual ingredients. I would also like to issue a plea that I did issue on Twitter yesterday. Please, people, I'm going to need you to pronounce bruschetta correctly. And it's not because I'm a nudge, but because people need to be able to pronounce my name. And the more people say bruschetta, the more people try and pronounce my last name Pennacchia, which is insane. It is Pennacchia, it's Pinocchio with different vowels. And so just tell your friends it's not actually pronounced bruschetta. Once a guy on a date actually corrected me.
But it's like a K, right? Like a
Yeah. Well, there's not a K in the Italian alphabet.
But it's CH. But I remember when I took Italian in college, that was one of the I took for it. Other than the lady next to me was gorgeous, so I was very distracted. I was 20 this in my defense. So, but the CK, if you see the CK, it's like a K.
Yeah. In certain contexts, I can write it down, but yeah, and CC is usually CH.
Bruschetta is something I've had a lot. My wife and I were in Italy for a while, traveling and but we tomatoes are insane there. It sounds like I'm being snotty here, but it's just like it's like you've never had a tomato when you have a tomato in Italy. And so obviously that's one of the reasons they build so many delicious things around tomatoes, which are delicious there. Like crazy salad, the bruschetta. But that's one of the things where afterward it felt there was a period where I just couldn't. Every tomato was so disappointing. So it was kind of like, well, I need
tomatoes have gotten better.
Yes.
They've gone back downhill again, but they started getting better in the US for a while because there was a period of time where they all tasted like water and it was terrible.
It was but I was at an event with my wife in California and they had bruschetta and I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot again. It was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of those things that's just, I think also for there's certain European dishes, I think both for me, Italy and France are this way, where they do certain things are very simple. So if you do one thing wrong, if it's kind of rooted in either the ingredients being very fresh, very good, or the present, being done well. And if you don't, and it's just a bad scene. And this was a bad scene. I was like, oh my God. And
I think what people try and do a lot of the time is make stuff just cooking wise way too complicated. And I think that especially with Italian food, people are like, I need to have 87,000 ingredients in everything. And I'm like, no, it's not. We're not doing that. I'm like, do some olive oil and garlic. We're good.
Yeah, so do sort of the idea if you do a spin on it, it's like, oh, well, why don't I try this? It's like, well, they would have thought about it. I'm sure if they had access, they might have added this to it or toasted the bread or done something like this. And so often something that's very simple something is added to it that kind of throws off what was sort of good about it. But yes, I thought of you when I saw that you had the non-caprese salad. Like, why would you do this?
It's a salad made of flies.
One of the other pop culture things I read out that I thought of you was apparently wedding gowns there's a movement towards wedding gowns being not white but black, so sort of the Morticia,
which was always what I planned on when I was a kid. It's like if I ever get married, I'm getting a whole funeral garb situation happening.
But you just don't. I'm sorry, but you don't. You never. You don't have a very Lydia Dietz type of vibe. You're sort of effort. You're kind of ebullient, like a very happy,
ebullient.
You present as very.
And yet, people always thought I was a goth because I guess I have really dark hair.
Yeah,
and I don't wear a lot of color.
There needs to be more to that than that. So you also never it's sort of weird. I've dated all I will say, I don't want to go too much to my unfortunate 20s dating habits, but having been in some goth homes in my 20s was this is like there's like a clear goth vibe in the place. It's very spooky. I was like trying to get an apartment once when it's in the mid '90s, and it was these two ladies, Morticia and Wednesday, kind of the both goth. The one was sort of older than the other, and like one did not speak, the others whatever, and it was just sort of they were very clear that it's like, okay, well, you seem very nice, like whatever, happy to move in. Just want to make sure you know right up front that we do coke, and that's just our thing. That's fine. If you don't want to, it's like, okay, well, okay. Also, sometimes we have friends who come
Mhm.
and we give them coke and they give us money. And else, so
So
like
you're gonna move in with some goth coke dealers? Is what's gonna happen?
drugged in. I
Yeah.
scratched out drugged in. That was a very lovely place on St. Mark's, though.
Yeah.
But not living in the drugged in with the that would not have passed my then weekly conversations with my mother. I'm thinking of living in the drugged in. So, but what else do we have? So, what are some other stuff that we have going on for this week? I feel like hopefully we'll get Clackamas County in Oregon. We'll have like um, finally get their act together and declare that Kurt Schrader is no longer represented there. Their voting system went kaput.
Yeah.
So they're having to it's been taking forever. And I just want to clarify, if anyone was paying attention in 2020 with all the
Yeah.
election laws, like you really need to get your shit together, because the longer you drag stuff out, bad people are gonna seize on it. Could really be a bad seed.
Mhm.
Just try to get your shit together. I think people were sort of even offering to help them and they refused. And so now here we are. Schrader, it was terrible. He was part of the Unbreakable Nine who helped break apart Build Back Better
Yeah.
uh, from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and sort of very much told his donors that the intent to do that was to kill it, Build Back Better.
Yeah.
And Biden still endorsed him because he was an incumbent. That's, I guess, what you do by country club rules. So I just feel like we need to prepare ourselves that Biden will endorse cinema, because that's
Yeah.
how you work in the city, because it's country club rules, and which the average voter, because the average person does not belong to a country club, either the
Mhm.
Senate or the ones downtown. And so they just would be like, this is not this doesn't make any sense to me. Why are you supporting someone who fundamentally taints your agenda? So, but I hope that we'll get some results on that.
Yeah.
And then Tuesday we have it's not much of a suspense. So Kemp is going to slaughter
Mhm.
David Perdue, Trump's pick. He's like
And then we've also got in that race, my gal Candace Taylor, who is
I think she's about 8. She's doing about 8%. She's crazy. I saw.
well, no, that's other in general. Other is getting 8%. I don't know what Candace Taylor is getting.
She's certainly other.
I swear to God, this woman takes my goddamn breath away. I always say, like, it's very hard to shock me. She shocks me. Like, I'm like, holy fucking shit, I cannot believe that this is a human person who exists and says words out loud. And like, yeah, the Georgia Guidestones thing, man. And then you saw, were you in the week or the day that I covered her comments on Native Americans?
I wasn't there. I think I sent you
Lisa.
that.
Oh yeah, you did. Oh my God, I'm such an asshole.
And,
My brain is very fried this weekend.
no. I saw it, like, oh gee, the sacrifice we made. It was sort of, but it's like super villain territory. Like,
yeah,
that's like, or the guy from Shrek, right? Like, some of you will die. That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. I don't like we gave no one of native descent gained anything from dying or from smallpox.
Yeah, no.
Or that you could do your Jesus.
And like they're all like, man, it was really worth it so that Candace Taylor could believe in Jesus, because she wouldn't have been able to otherwise in England, a country that had an official religion.
Yeah, these folks. I mean, Virginia, you'd written today about how they are now wanting to rename things after,
Yeah.
and so that was the whole thing of like, look, no one wants to shame anyone if they were white, because white people did awful things in the past, but you are making the choice
To
today
celebrate it right now.
to name your school after Confederate General Negro slave catcher, and that is like, okay, well, you're probably a bad person if you
Yeah.
believe that. And then we have to then talk about all the terrible, like Samuel Jackson was a horrible person. So here's some
Yeah.
stuff he did.
But we can't talk about that because that would be talking about race, and that's illegal.
So we just need to
What
talk
are we going
about
to say that the Civil
why
War
are
was
you
over?
singling him out because he defended America, in his sedition from the American government, which has to be race, because otherwise it's like, why are we celebrating traitors? Oh, we like traitors when they.
I mean, the Civil War was 4 years long. The fact that they're like, this is our entire heritage, this 1 4-year period, does not say good things.
Well, yes, it's like the time I was in high school. So now, but when you and I were in high school or college, it seemed like a long time, right? The whole thing of changing. But now it just seems like I've forgotten the past 4 years. It's like, oh, right, that was 4 years ago or something. So it just seems like that's a very brief period. That's not even a very successful TV show. Like, if you said, oh, well.
Civil War canceled after 4 seasons. Not that good. Did not get 6 seasons in a movie.
Yes, we will. Well, now everything, because of streaming, it can end quickly. You can still see it. There was a period where you were hoping desperately that it could at least get to 65 episodes or 100 episodes, because that would be able to be stripped. But it was like, well, you're never going to see this show again, because no one's going to pay to put it on the air again before Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune. So yes, their whole thing is about, but I mean, they won the Civil War, right? The South, like they withdrew the federal troops. They imposed apartheid rules, and
they're definitely not losers.
So they've got what they're going with there. So yeah, I mean, it's just disappointing, but that's kind of where these folks are, and they just love the heritage. I mean, and you live, I'm sure, in places in the Northeast where you'll drive around and you'll see Confederate flags and be like, well,
absolutely, right in Massachusetts. I'm not even. No.
You are overtly Yankees, guys, but it's like, well, no.
Oh, I am dead serious. There was a kid in my 7th grade class who had one on his backpack. And I can still picture it to this day because I would get so mad every time I saw it. But the thing is, all of this, like I said, the thing is all about them getting their country back, because they're like, we have to turn the children into bigots who don't think the Civil War was like, that the North was right, or else, we're going to lose our country forever unless, kids are learning about the War of Northern Aggression. Which I did not believe for years. Because, you always assume that, like, your parents are exaggerating stories from their childhood. Just as a matter of, I don't know if other people do that. I did. I assumed my parents were, half the time full of shit. So my mom grew up half the year in Rhode Island and half the year in Florida because her dad worked for Highlight. He was an engineer. He did the scoreboards. Apparently that was very difficult to do without, like, everything back in the day. World's fastest sport. And she would tell me the differences about, like, going to school in Rhode Island and going to school in Florida. And she told me, she's like, yeah, they called the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. And I totally thought that she made that up until I think I was in high school.
Oh yeah.
Like, because that sounded insane.
And just the irony of it, given that, which is not a history told to many people, I think many otherwise educated people will be unaware, but the South had been arguably since the Constitution was founded, like, slowly working to expand slavery everywhere. So you can place, Dred Scott, Fugitive Slave Act. These are all things for the goal of expanding slavery everywhere, because they can't just have, otherwise you just sort of leave.
Because then it'll look like maybe they're jerks for owning people.
Well, also because then it's very hard, otherwise people would leave. I'm free now. so fuck you, and they want to be able to go wherever they want, right? So
Yeah.
I want to be able to go up to New York for my conference and have my slaves with me, because God forbid I do any work for myself or pay for it. So but my slave, if I take him to New York, he'll probably be like, yeah, I'm gonna leave now because you're terrible.
Yeah.
So they make this so that there is no the fact, and which is what, and if you knew that history, it's like, oh yeah, of course is what they're dealing with abortion bans, or gay. They want everything to be national. The whole concept of states' rights is a fraud. So even when
Yeah.
some Sorkin style liberals will be like, oh well, they just believe in states' rights and they just want Alabama to be Alabama. No, it's like they want America to be Alabama,
Yeah.
because they want the perception that they are wrong. They want the whole world to believe what they believe. You don't kind of you're not an authoritarian in a vacuum, right? Like, you tend to
Hmm.
spread. So it's that's kind of where we're going. The history is so clear to that, and it's one of those things of, it's like a repeat. It's like, well, yeah, yeah, this is what happened. This is how the push occurred. Um, I mean, I think people don't realize maybe that one of the first black senators was from Mississippi,
Yeah.
and you go because if you don't really talk about how there were so many gains in Reconstruction, it just looks like, okay,
Oh
well,
yeah.
Jim Crow sucks, but you went from a slave to potentially being lynched every third week, but that's not great, but you're still free, maybe. So, like, it's a line, right? But instead it was more like you were freed, and like maybe you're a full-on citizen and you're in Congress and you're a
Yeah.
senator. And then that's like, white people are like, no, you're not voting and you're not going to be in representation, and now you're in apartheid. So it's kind of like, which is sort of
Yeah.
that triangle, your rope is your sort
And
of.
that, I think, is definitely sort of what's happening now. Is they're like, oh, everyone got a little too free, and we have to crack down on it right now. And that's,
Yeah,
sort of what is happening.
definitely. I think for queer rights, anyone for uterus, their rights are just pretty much where that's great. I mean, and the intersection of poverty will make that even worse. I don't know. I mean, I tend to be in Portland here in white liberal land, and there's a lot of, I've noticed, of just defeatism, and by that being
Yeah.
off amongst well-off white liberals. There's that sense of, I'm just don't want to hear about politics anymore. I don't want to hear about this anymore.
Mhm.
I just want to retreat into my safety. I know it's terrible, but I can retreat into my safety. And it's because, as you had said at the top of this, there are a lot of people who their lives won't drastically change. So then it's just like, I'm just gonna turn the news off. I'm not gonna write, whatever, K Hive or thing I might have had on my bio. I just can't deal with this anymore. I'm just gonna live my
Yeah.
I want to go to brunch, right? And not
Yeah.
think of it. And I think that's the sort of wink and a nod that Republicans are saying. We're gonna bring back security. We're gonna bring back, we won't hurt you when we're in charge. You're gonna get, tax cuts or whatever. And if you're well off, you're gonna be okay. We're gonna make the homeless people go away. Don't ask questions about that if you live in the cities, and everything will smooth out. So, that's my concern. I don't know
Yeah.
what is the most effective activist way to respond to what we're seeing.
I mean, honestly, I don't know at this point. I do think that Democrats and liberals very much need to get on school boards and town boards and all of this shit if they live in. Yes, we do brunch hard. With I did bring an umbrella. But, um, that one's not waterproof either, like the Gucci one. I lost my train of thought. I
Of
do
course.
think that we very much need to be getting on school boards because that's what they've been doing and that's what they are doing. And, if you live in a smaller town, especially where you might not even have any competition, get your ass on there. Get your, because that's what they're doing. They're taking over school boards. They're taking over town councils. They're taking over boards of selectmen. Um, And that's how they're doing it small town by small town, and then it's everywhere all of a sudden.
Yes, and that's been like steadily infiltrating through, and I think that's something maybe
we've been doing a top-down kind of influence for the most part, like, you know, what with the way that we control the media and all. No, but
well, yeah, conservatives do believe
you know,
that progressives control the media and the culture, and they're just fighting back. And even though I don't see that. I'm trying to be minded. It just seems like we're not in control. But yeah, I want to talk about something before we leave. Pleasant. So, could you think? What are some anything you're watching or seeing? Is there some sort of pop culture thing that is of interest to you right now?
I don't know. I watched Murder, She Wrote yesterday, so like that's what I was doing.
I love that show as a kid.
It's a classic.
I am such a fan of Jessica Fletcher that I actually did not think the clever idea that she's the one killing everyone.
Yeah.
I want to believe in a world where this nice, probably not, it was probably like in her, I think her early 50s at the time, but this nice lady around my age was traveling the country and helping. We need more Jessica Fletchers in the world. So she was going and solving mysteries. This is fun.
Yeah. I love how, like, every dude that she meets wants a piece. Like it is every episode there is some man being like, I would like to romance you, JB Fletcher. It's great. I'm like, good for you. I love television shows in general where it's like, you know, an older woman who's just like getting it. Like the Golden Girls, they were getting nailed left and right. And, you know, I feel like that is just a really good message to send to the children.
Yeah.
Like, so you can get, you know, you can be Blanche Devereaux forever.
Yes, it was awesome. I think I saw a little night music with it was Catherine Zeta-Jones was in it, and lovely. And I but when Angela Lansbury left, I think she was replaced by Elaine Stritch, who I went back and saw again with her and Bernadette Peters. So it was a great run, which is a show I would have recommended to any of my friend who's there. But now I don't really know what's playing. Just get my son.
Not Elaine Stritch.
No,
not Elaine Stritch.
He is not doing much of anything now. Unfortunately, she was great. Great. So, well, before we leave, what are you going to be working on for tomorrow? Or you have in your head?
Again, I am primarily focused on going to eat crab legs.
It's
our Sunday tradition. We like to go to this random place and get crab legs in a giant, bucket with shrimp and potatoes and corn and everything, and drink things with umbrellas in them, and have bibs and gloves, and it's a good time. So that's all I care about on Sundays. Until I
would have a similar crab affection, although my wife would have a similar affection, though she's from the Northwest, so it would be sort of, she's kind of Dungeness and so forth. But I think she loves Northeast crab as well. So, but yes, enjoy.
I mean, I'm a New Englander at heart. I like to eat food where I get to wear a bib. Like, Gia and I actually always joke that instead of Old Spice, we would, get a fella who smells like Old Bay.
That would be awesome. Yes, I love
that Old Spice? No, it's Old Bay. We invent commercials sometimes.
Yes, I'm going to be in New England at some point, to Maine, in July, and so I am very excited to get some of the lovely New England. And I'm a Rhode Island clam chowder fan, as though I know you find that disturbing.
I'm not. It's not good.
I'm a fan of the clear broth.
I literally know no one who eats that.
Well, come on, it's being served. It's served there. It's their
I've
thing.
seen it. I've seen it on menus. Dad, do you know anyone who actually eats the Rhode Island chowder? Okay, I know. I'm asking you a question for the show. Yeah. My dad, Dante, is going to tell us. Have you ever actually seen anyone eat the clear clam chowder in Rhode Island?
Yes.
Okay, he has. I haven't.
I stand by it. So thank you, sir.
That kind.
I look. I like all the. I like all.
Oh, my dad says it's the real kind. I still no.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been vindicated. So upon my
So
vindication,
you and Dante.
thank you, sir. Upon my vindication, thank you all for joining us, and we'll
Yes, thank you.
see you next time.